Have you ever felt like you don't measure up to someone God might want to use? Maybe you think your background, your weaknesses, or your past mistakes disqualify you from being used of God. If so, you're in for a surprise. Today we're looking at the story of Samson, one of the most famous and flawed heroes in the Bible. His story teaches us that God can use anyone, even the most unlikely candidates, to accomplish His purpose. Our key message today is this: God often chooses and uses ordinary, imperfect people to carry out His extraordinary plans. As we open Judges 13, we find Israel once again under oppression, this time by the Philistines. But God is about to raise up a deliverer in an unexpected way. The story begins with an ordinary couple, Manoah and his wife, who are unable to have children. This sets the stage for a miraculous birth reminiscent of other important figures in Israel's history. An angel appears to Manoah's wife with an astounding message. You are barren and childless, but you're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Judges 13:3. The angel goes on to give specific instructions about raising this child as a Nazarite dedicated to God from birth. This encounter teaches us several important lessons. God often works through ordinary people. Manoah and his wife weren't leaders of people or great influencers, yet God chose them for this important task. God has plans that go beyond our current circumstances. What looked like a dead infertility became the starting point for God's deliverance. Obedience to God's instructions is crucial. The angel gave specific guidelines for raising Samson, emphasizing the importance of following God's plan. As the story unfolds, we see Samson grow up and the Spirit of the Lord begins to stir him. Judges 13:25. But we quickly realize that Samson is far from the perfect hero. He demands to marry a Philistine woman against his parents' wishes and Israelites' customs. Yet verse 4 tells us his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. This reveals a profound truth. God can use even our flaws and mistakes to accomplish His purposes. This doesn't excuse Samson's behavior, but it shows that God's plans are bigger than our shortcomings. Samson's supernatural strength is first displayed when he tears apart a lion with his bare hands, Judges 14:6. This strength, we're told, comes from the Spirit of the Lord who came powerfully upon him. It demonstrates that our effectiveness in God's service comes not from our own abilities, but from His power working through us. This story takes several dramatic turns involving a riddle, betrayal, and Samson's violent revenge against the Philistines. Throughout these events, we see a man struggling with his own desires and impulses, yet still being used by God to begin delivering Israel from the Philistine oppression. Let me share a personal story that illustrates how God uses ordinary, imperfect people. The man who led me to faith in Christ had a difficult start in life. Given away by his birth mother shortly after birth, he was taken in by a pastor and his wife who hoped to adopt him. But 5 years later, his birth mother reclaimed him, tearing him away from his family, the only family he had known. This traumatic experience could have derailed his life, but the pastor and his wife continued to pray for this boy, even though they couldn't see him. Years later, as a teenager, he was allowed to visit them. During that visit, he attended a church with them, and that night, the pastor's wife asked if he would like to give his heart to Jesus. With tears in his eyes, he said yes. The boy grew up to become a powerful youth evangelist. It was at one of his meetings that I heard the gospel and gave my life to Christ. God used an ordinary couple's faithfulness in prayer, a boy's broken past, and an unlikely series of events to change not just one life, but to change many lives, including mine. What God does in our lives often begins what He has done in someone else's life, some ordinary person who walks humbly with Him. So what does Samson's story mean for you and me? How can we apply these truths to our lives? 1, don't disqualify yourself from God's service because of your background or perceived inadequacies. God specializes in using unlikely people. 2, recognize that your strength comes from God, not yourself. Like Samson, our effectiveness depends on the Spirit's power, not our own abilities. 3, be aware of your weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Samson's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked desires. 4, understand that God's plans are bigger than our mistakes. While this doesn't excuse poor choices, it reminds us that God can work even through our flaws. And 5, obey God's instructions, even when they don't make sense. Samson's parents followed the angel's unusual directions, setting the stage for God's work. As we close, I want to challenge you. Where in your life do you feel inadequate or disqualified from serving God? God may want to use your unique background, even your flaws or past mistakes, for His purpose. Remember, the God who chose Samson, with all his imperfections, is the same God who wants to work through you today. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Will you, like Samson's parents, say yes to God's call, even if it seems unlikely or doesn't make sense? When you do, you open the door for God to do extraordinary things through your ordinary life.